The first real movement in Tai Chi is called beginning Tai Chi. It is very simple, isn't it? Feet parallel, hands rise, hands lower. There. Simple, boring. It reminds me of a piano recital I went to where we had already heard some young kids playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the violins, and then a young lady, maybe 11 years old, came up and was announced that she was going to be playing A Voudrais-je Maman, or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, also known as the alphabet song. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Anyway, so she was going to play this on the piano. And we all went, this'll be cute too. And she sat down and played Mozart's 12 Variations on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And 15 minutes later, we were all considerably more impressed than we had expected to be. And the Tai Chi form starts out looking very, very simple. But there are many different ways to do this movement. And when I teach this, I keep telling people these days that I don't teach a style, I teach an art. The style is up to you. And if you end up with the same style as me, exactly the same style, then I've done something wrong. There is not just a room for variations, there is a need for variations. The variations on the movements are an essential part of the art form. If you are doing the movements exactly the way you were taught your whole life, then you're missing something. It's paint by numbers. It's extremely Confucian. Confucius has a really strong influence in many countries, and that's because he's extremely popular with authoritarian regimes. The free thinkers like Lao Tzu and Mo Tzu particularly, they burned his books and killed his students because they were thinking too much. And Confucius came along, and he was great. Aside from being a guy who had no positive male role model in his life, his philosophy was really suitable for authoritarian governments. Sure, he had all of the good common sense stuff like don't be a dick, clean your room, try to keep things in reasonable order, and have some harmony with the universe. But there was also a lot of do what you're told, and behave yourself. There was not a lot of room for really good creative thinking. Now, if you grew up in a traditional martial arts culture, it's quite possible that you grew up in a community where you had multiple generations and lots of different influences. You may have even been raised in a Confucian household, but there's probably always some uncle or grandfather or aunt or grandmother. There's always some crazy relative who at some point in your life will go, yeah, those are the rules, yes. But just saying, there's nuance. And sometimes it's okay to take that stick out of your butt and don't be a slave to the way things were. If things didn't change, we'd all be dead. If we only imitated our ancestors, then we'd all be doing cave paintings and there would be no Group of Seven or Andy Warhol or any of that stuff. So, Group of Seven, I'm Canadian, Andrew, A.Y. Jackson was a friend of mine. Anyway, okay, no, not really. But anyway, I like his stuff. So, creativity is not just about doing something that's different from other things. Creativity is a way of learning. It's a way of understanding. It's a way of exploring what you're doing and giving it meaning. And with martial arts, this is extremely important. If you are only copying and not developing your own understanding, then you're missing the whole point. Many teachers have told the story about the teacher on his deathbed who realizes that all of his students are doing the art exactly the same way that he did, and he realizes he's a complete failure because nobody has actually developed an understanding of it. It's like If you understand Einstein's theory of relativity enough to be able to quote it, that's not good enough. You have to be able to really understand it. So sure, memorizing and learning stuff is fine, but you also have to put back into it the amount of learning that you're getting out of it. Okay? You have to have a balance between, looking at it from the outside and looking at it from the inside, if that makes some kind of sense. So, this simple movement, right? You can do this, and whenever you do a movement in Tai Chi, and you learn it at a particular school, and then you see somebody doing something completely different, you'll say, oh, that's completely different from what I do. They're going off to the side, and they're doing little swirls like this. Oh, that's nothing like this. That's not the same thing at all. Or maybe they're turning to the court, they're doing this, like that. Oh, that's completely different. And then you show it to some old master who says, yes, exactly the same thing. I had a friend who played jazz, one of the great jazz pianists of his era, and he would get these requests for songs every once in a while. Girl from Ipanema is the famous one, where it was requested, he played it, and the person who requested it didn't recognize it. When are you going to play Girl from Ipanema? I just played it. That was 3 songs ago. So that's jazz for you. So why all these different variations? What are people doing when they change it, when they make a new style? Well, it's their understanding of how they're aligning the body, what they're trying to develop. See, in one way, these movements are thinking about particular techniques. And the techniques will vary depending on where in their mind the opponent is and what the timing is. So if the opponent is far away, you might do this. Or if the opponent is closer, you might do this. If they're grappling, then you may do this. Or you might turn, depending on where you think the person is grabbing you, from behind or from the side. Or if they're throwing a punch, you might engage this way or this way. If they're grabbing your wrists, you might do a classic grappling movement, like that. So this is the way you would start. And this looks very different from this until you consider the next movement, which is this. And then suddenly you start to say, oh, that's similar to this. This is Chen style. I've seen that in Chen style, or I've seen that in Wu style, or Sun style, or whatever. And so, but even within each of those styles, everybody has a different way of doing it. So 2 people studying from the same teacher might look completely different. In fact, they probably should. If you are doing things exactly the same as everybody else, it's sort of like in music when you're learning scales. And you're learning the arpeggios. And of course, everybody plays it. You can all play it together, and nobody has to worry, but the rhythm is going to be the same. You can speed it up. But each person could add their own flavor, the way they strike the keys, or a dozen different ways to hit a piano key. And, well, more than that, really. But and different emotion, just hitting a single note. So the same variations are going to happen. Now, in some cases, a spectator watching can't tell the difference. In some cases, a spectator watching can't tell the similarity. It doesn't mean there are no similarities. It doesn't mean there are no differences. It just means that the person who's doing it has a better understanding of what they're doing than you do. And sometimes the observer can tell, and sometimes the observer can't. So thinking that you can have a standard way of doing a movement, that's an admirable goal from a strict beginner's pedagogical point of view. So standardization has its role, has its places. You want to learn the scales, you want to learn what keys are. But you don't want to tell a person that they can only play in a particular key, that you can't play the Star-Spangled Banner in a minor key, which is kind of fun. Try it. It sounds kind of Russian. So here are some variations on this first movement. The hands rise, extend like that, and then the elbows drop, the hands lower, and the body lowers. This is a popular one. I do it a lot like this most of the time. There. So another version is to let the hands drop, and it rolls like the engagement is coming from the shoulders. So it rolls up and out to the fingertips and then rolls back. So it's like you're rolling a ball this way. And sometimes it's like you're extending this way and then dropping down, like you're reaching out and then sliding down the front. So the ball is sort of rolling this way. And there are many different flavors of that idea. So you can extend and come back. You can extend and come forward. And it would take a long time for me to describe all of the different subtleties and the different ways that I do it. But I'll just do a few different variations of this one. So this is a popular one. This is a popular one. This is another. This is another. Sometimes there's a slight turning. Yeah, it's very slight. All you're doing is you change the slight predominance of the weight on one leg or the other. So you can be symmetrical, but you can have the weight bounce back and forth between the legs. So I'm a little more on my left hip and then a little more on my right hip. So there's a very subtle, externally imperceptible change, but I'm pivoting on this side. So if someone were to push me right now, you can't see it, but if you were to push me, I would roll like this. If you push me in the middle, I would pivot around that shoulder. But I can also switch and put it on the other shoulder. So now if you push me, I would pivot on this shoulder, on this line. So it doesn't look like I'm moving, but internally I'm making changes from side to side. And then I'll go back to the middle again so that the waist is pivoting around a solid hip base. So that's one idea there. And some people will round the arms. There. And some people keep the elbows quite down like that. There. And then you get into, and there are about a dozen more sort of based on that theme, but they're not different enough really, I think, for this demonstration. But then you have this with this variation attached to it, and then smaller circles and there, or simply up, down, and there, or without the hands rising, just this. So the hands are rising, but the movement that looks like this, in some styles, that's it right there. I just did it. And in application, the movement has had the similar effect, but in my mind, the distance between me and the opponent is different, and the way they're engaging is different. So I don't have to do this big movement. I can do this and have the same effect. The person still gets knocked down or pushed away. So it's a different range. That's all. But you can have this, and then this to the corner, there, and then all of the other variations with the arms can be attached to that variation. So you have arpeggios on top of a different baseline, and so up and down to the corner and the back, and then spiral, inside, and there. And the movements are not just doing this, it's changing that fulcrum in the middle. You're changing the balance point. So a lot of what you're doing cannot be seen, but the physical effect on the opponent as they're engaging is really significant. It's more important than the movement itself. So what I'm doing inside with the waist, with the hips, with the core muscles, and with the dantian, which not to be confused with the waist, it's not the same thing, not in this context. Some contexts it is. Again, we were talking about the dantian before. The dantian could include everything from the navel to the feet. That's the lower dantian in some schools of thought. In others, it's between here and the pelvis. In others, it's here. Then there are other dantians. There's the middle dantian, upper dantian, and all of the other dantians throughout the body. Sometimes they're treated like chakras. Sometimes they're treated like... Sorry, that was last week's lesson. This is a different one. Then you have different stances. So the hips might be turned out for some styles. And in one style say, no, that's completely incorrect. And they say, well, why do you do that? And so, maybe the grandmaster was a little lazy. Or maybe there's a real reason for doing this. And having trained with people who do this, there's some really cool reasons for doing this. But teaching it this way is a problem. So if you teach beginners a non-standard way like this, then you have to explain to them a lot more about the dynamics in the hips and the pelvis and the legs in order for this one to be functional. Otherwise, people do this and they develop bad habits. So then you go back to the standardized feet parallel thing. But even then, you still need to explain that stuff with the hips. It's just you're less likely to run into problems with this posture than you are with the more creative ones, the other variations. Then you have movements like this, where it comes up and down and in, and there's a step there to extend. So really the commencement is this. That's the correlation. But I can't get myself to do that without this step. And within this, there are variations on the angles of the hands or the direction. So maybe the hands go up and then back down again, or they go up and they come back in and they go down here a little and then they bounce and then go like that. So lots of little variations. And these make more sense once you've done push hands, once you've done some real fighting, once you've done some grappling, some joint locking, some chin-na, understanding pressure points, understanding pivots and structure and manipulating the bones and so on. This makes more sense after you've done a lot of other stuff. So that's the other thing about the art. You learn the basics, you think you understand it, then you get deeper into it, and then you go, oh, wow, that's what that was. I had no idea that's what we were learning in the beginning. I guess I wasn't learning it then, so you have to go back. And then you go through, you take that bit of knowledge and you apply that to everything that you've learned so far. That changes that again, and you go back. Then that means that this has to change. So it's like tempering. It's like making a sword where you hammer it out, fold it back, hammer it out, fold it back, hammer it out, fold it back. Thank you, Sam Message, for that analogy. See, I do remember stuff, even if I don't know what it means. Yeah, you tried. Thanks. My teachers, they're rolling their eyes somewhere now. But so that's some of the variations. There are lots of others. There are lots of things, and when I do them with my flavor. So if I'm trying to demonstrate somebody else's style, it's like trying to imitate somebody else's accent. I may be able to present the idea or the sort of an impression of what they sound like, but I am clearly not them. So I'm sort of mimicking an idea of what they look like they're doing to me when I see them do it. Sometimes it's hard to tell what somebody's doing by watching. Sometimes if you're really good, you just see them once and you go, wow, I never thought of that. That changes everything. And sometimes it doesn't matter how good you are, you look at what a person's doing and you go, I have no idea why they're doing that way. So this beginning movement, if someone is attacking, then if they're far enough away, I want to get my hands out there and I want to have that structure when I'm engaging from this far away. So before their punch gets to me, I want to be on their hand or their elbow or the shoulder. I want to be able to intercept, which means that the shoulders are going to go down, the elbow will drop, the wrist will drop, and I'll be there. And wherever I intercept, wherever I get them, I have this structure in my body that connects to the ground so that when they hit me, this power here is going to be redirected into the earth, and I'll be, shall we say, minimizing force. It's something I'll get into in another video about how to meet a force without using force. So when you intercept, you don't want to be two equal surface areas like this. You want to have less surface area, better vectors, better what I call centripetal engagement. Again, that's another video. But in other words, you want to engage like this and connect the other person to the ground, but in a way that doesn't restrict you to being a solid block of bone and muscle. So I don't want to be like this, because then if they're really strong, I get pushed over, get knocked off. But if I am aligned properly, then I can engage them. They'll bounce off, but I am also fluid so that they cannot engage my center, so that I can engage them. They bounce away, but they can't bounce me away. The biomechanics of this we'll get into later, and I'll try to find a good model to explain this. But so when I'm doing this and I'm thinking about a long-range attack, that's what I'm doing. I'm also moving my feet. I'm also thinking about where the axis might go. So the axis might go over here, it might go over there, and I might not do the same movement the same way twice because I want to maintain that kind of variability. In the beginning, I'll practice very strictly one way, then very strictly another. But now when I'm practicing, I can see it go all over the place. And I may have an imaginary an opponent that may or may not be human, and may just be a mass of forces that I'm visualizing, engaging, trying to feel the tides, or imagine being up to my neck in tide water and feeling the tide shifting and changing, and I'm trying to connect that to the ground, and so on. So there are lots of really neat little visualizations that go on all the time when the basics are so natural that you have room for the creativity. Right? So sure, there are rules, there are scales, there are chords, there are basic movements that you learn. But that is designed, all of that form and structure is designed to allow you to liberate yourself from that form and that structure. So a movement like this is teaching you all kinds of things about the movements of your spine and the muscles and the bones and the fascia. And every muscle and tendon is talking, is communicating. So instead of just da 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 da, you've got a whole bunch of things happening all at once. And this part over here has to be in harmony with this. The hands are in the same key as the legs, and then if there's a plagal, then they all go together. You don't have the legs changing key when the hands don't. Unless, well, okay, it depends. I mean, there are rules and there are rules. And sometimes breaking the rules is one of the most harmonious things you can do. So this, raising the hands, there's a lot going on. Now, if I'm just playing a very simple version of Twinkle Twinkle, just one finger, one note, then yeah, it's just the hands going up and down. But when I think about the chords and the changes, then I'm feeling everything change all through the body. The chest changes shape, the ribs change shape, my mind changes shape, the emotional content changes. So there are subtle things about the way that the mind and the body interact, where you can change your thinking, change your feeling, change your emotions by simply changing your posture a little. And imagine your opponent is smaller than you. Imagine your opponent is bigger than you. But you don't have to think about a specific technique. This is another thing I want to get to, is that technique and method, there's an interplay here that is maybe too much for this video. Sometimes you can think about a specific technique, and there is a way of doing Tai Chi where you practice thinking about a specific technique with an opponent doing a specific thing. So your opponent grabs your wrists, and then you do this, and you change the leg, and then you can do that or that. There are all these different things that you can do, but it depends on the opponent attacking you in exactly the right way. There's another way of training where you're not thinking about a specific technique, you're just thinking about the connection and the balance to the ground, and you're sort of improvising with indeterminate forces, so that the opponent can be anywhere, in any direction, grabbing anything. And the quality that you develop in the body is something that transcends the limits of technique. So this is stuff I've talked about before, but it's important to be able to insert that here as well. So the technique is great, but you want to be able to transcend the limits of technique. The form is extremely important, but you want to be able to transcend the limits of form. And the meaning of the form will change as you change and as you develop. So yeah, sure, hands rise, hands lower, the body lowers. When I teach this in my form, I have a standard way of doing it. And the standard way is shoulders sink, elbows drop, the wrists sit, the hands go out, the spine aligns with it, this opens up. I feel the connection through the dantian, through the yongquan, through the channels. All of the channels open up. This is me, this is not you. But this happens, so I have this connection from there to the feet. And then the elbows drop toward the knees, the wrists sit, the hands lower, the body lowers. Now, I am strongly influenced by my teachers, but I am equally influenced by the independent training that I've done with other martial artists of other styles. So this is something that I like to do because I like to practice with the opponent out there. I like to start the fight by winning, so they haven't got to me yet. The movement in Tai Chi called beginning Tai Chi, it's important to understand there's a difference between sport fighting and real fighting. Not that sport fighting isn't real, but there are rules and there's a standard and an expectation with sport fighting that you don't have with real fighting. Real fighting starts like this, where your mind wanders, you go, oh, and the guy punches you and it takes about a tenth of a second and you're unconscious. So being ready is that. You're just standing there minding your own business, and then everything changes. And you want to be able to make those changes internally and externally in a hundredth of a second. It should just be natural and instinctive. And it won't be natural and instinctive if you are stuck on the idea of a technique or a form. And later we'll get into scenario training ideas and that sort of thing. But the idea is to be light and sensitive and liberated from the structure and the order and the rules. And then you have an advantage. So part of the training in the beginning to deal with an attack is to be able to see it coming a long way away. You don't just see the punch coming. You don't just see the energy behind the punch. You don't just see the intent behind the punch. You see the motivation behind the punch and the cause of the motivation behind the punch. You should see the punch coming 5 minutes before it gets to you. That's the ideal. And you have to learn how to tell when a person is going, like this, and then it builds, and then the surprise happens. So if you see it sooner, then the fight never happens. That's the ideal. If the fight does happen, you've already won by the time it gets there. That's the plan. Having said that, in martial arts, a lot of the time we're training to deal with things that have sneaked up on you. So we're not learning how to start by winning. We're learning how to deal with the fact that we're losing already. And this assumes a really neat idea that you have entered into the fight without knowing it. The world is chaotic and violent, and you can't do anything about it. So how do you swim and manage within all of that chaos? The tides are there. You're in the ocean. It's pushing you around. What do? Right? The correct answer is, well, don't get there in the first place. You shouldn't have been swimming when the tide was that high. There's a serious undertow. If you're in Hawaii, don't go in the water if the locals are not swimming, because you'll swim out a few feet, the undertow will get you, and you'll end up in Fiji. So, yes, there's that. But then, what happens if you did everything wrong and you end up in that situation? Do you just give up because you should have done it right before? No, you deal with the situation as it is. And a lot of martial arts training is practicing getting into ridiculous situations and then getting out of them. It's like the drills that they do in chess, where you set up something that would never happen in a real chess game, but you set up a problem and then see if you can get yourself out of it. And that's the sort of thing that we do in martial arts all the time. So somebody grabs your arm, what do? Well, the correct answer is don't let them grab your arm. But if they do, then what? And once you get better and better at getting out of those situations when you are seriously challenged, then you get better and better at not letting those things happen in the first place. The two sort of help each other. So imagine you are already in a desperate situation. You're in a bear hug, where then this movement changes. Now it's how do you connect to the ground? How do you maintain that centripetal engagement? How do you release your spine so that they're not controlling you? You are swimming within it so that their grip doesn't have an effect. And then you sort of pour like a water balloon, and the hands rise. And then you have control of them. You've basically taken them onto your back, and you are their support all of a sudden. So this is what happens. So you just get in there and you go, yeah, that's fine. Grab their fingers, toss them down, that sort of idea. They're grabbing your throat, grab their throat. And go up the inside, or go up the outside, create an imbalance and take them off balance. Or become asymmetrical, so you split this, you lift the elbow, and then you roll and connect to their head, like that. Or they come in and you take the arm, you intercept, you lock. So all of these things are. It'd be nice to have another person here, but I'm not allowed to be within 6 feet of anybody. Some people I'm not allowed to be within 50 feet of, but that's another story. No, no restraining orders have successfully been delivered to my address. So, that's a bad joke. I shouldn't use it. So, from here, when you do this movement, remember that there's a lot more to it. In the beginning, you won't know what there is to it. Unless you've done martial arts before and you've done Tai Chi before, then yes, this will start to take on a different meaning. But when you start to do push hands, when you start to do fighting, when you start to work with weapons, when you start to develop a better understanding of the way your mind and your body interact, even if you don't do this for any martial arts purpose, understanding the variations and the different ways that the body interacts with the ground, the way that the mind interacts with the body, the way that the emotions are affected by posture and thought, all of this stuff is going to become very real. And this will affect everything that you do. It's amazing how the work that we do applies to arts like riding a horse, or playing the piano, or painting. How this stuff that was initially developed as a way of learning how to regulate violence becomes a way of regulating the self and understanding your relationship with the rest of the world. And that changes the way everybody practices their art. It's really interesting. And occasionally we get people starting to apply this now to physics, to psychology, neurology, and I'm having some really interesting conversations with people who use words I don't understand. It's really fun. That's one of the many things I like about the art. So this is your first movement. Hands rise, hands lower. That's all there is to it. How you do it, on your own time, that's up to you. But I'm just going to do some variations if you don't mind. Very good. More practice.